Am I teacher? Okay. All right, everybody, I'm apologizing in advance because this is as loud as I can talk today, and we are to end at exactly 12:55 so that I can get to the doctor and find out why I can't talk any louder. So, hi, everybody, welcome to Lunch and Learn. I'm in disbelief that we are here because this is week one. Okay, now that it is officially noon, the folks on live stream will join us. Welcome. I'm in disbelief that we are here. This is the beginning of the month of Elul Lunch and Learn, which means that this week, for the next 4 weeks, each rabbi of the synagogue is taking turns. Yes.
Somebody who's trying to get on to watch from home says, could you tell the rabbi that the Zoom link is wrong? It's till August, it doesn't work.
Aileen, apparently the Zoom link is not working. I do know we're having some technical difficulty today. As you can see, the owl's a little bit pixelated at a little bit of a delay. Aileen on the back end is doing the best that she can. She will update the Zoom link if there's anything to do. We will do it.
Thank you. And I will also just weigh in that if the person can join on the live stream instead of the Zoom link, if they just want to observe today, that would be beneficial. Thank you.
So for the next 4 weeks, we are going to get ready for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And my dear Rabbi Richard Levy of blessed memory, taught us that preparing for the high holidays ought to be a marathon and not a sprint. And what he meant by that was that when you prepare for something, if you were to just say, I'm going to run a marathon today without stretching, without doing a few miles a day and then growing and growing and growing, you wouldn't be successful. So by recognizing that the month of Elul starts now, we have an entire month to stretch, to prepare our bodies. This is not good that my Zoom is not connecting. Because we're going to use a Zoom link in a moment. And we're going to start ourselves thinking about who we are, where we want to go, and how we might get there in order to then be able to really feel ready for the holidays. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move, no. I was going to try to. Okay, Aileen, can I share my slideshow?
Your computer unfortunately logged off.
That way.
Your computer actually logged off.
I see that. Yeah, I see that. So I want to just send you my PowerPoint so that I don't have to worry about if I drop on and off again. Although it looks like I'm back on.
You're back on.
Oh, but now my sharing. Will you share me as a host, please?
It's a technical day. Our apologies. I cannot make you a co-host from here.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my my PowerPoint with you.
Lovely.
Excellent. Okay, I just sent it to you. It is a Google slideshow.
Thank you. I'll get that set up and then we'll get started in a minute.
And we will be patient. So each week, you will receive an email from the synagogue. So yesterday you received one that said that week 1 is awakening. So that's the theme that we're going to focus on today. I do not off the top of my head remember the other four, but they are all different themes that help us to think and reflect on who we are, where we've been, and where we want to go. And we're going to do that through that Monday email and message that we filmed, through Torah study, through Lunch and Learn on Tuesday, and then the Shabbat message will also look at that same theme. And then the following week, we will build a little bit. We will take a new theme so that by the time we get to Fleet Boat in 4 Saturdays, which is the first official service of the high holidays, our goal is that you feel warm, like your muscles are stretched, and like you are really prepared for the high holidays. So today we're going to talk about awakening. And Aileen, will you go to the first slide, please? So when we open our eyes in the morning, I have this deep tendency to turn and find my cell phone. My dog tries really hard to say, the first thing that you should see in the morning is me and not the phone, which I think is a really beautiful metaphor for us thinking about when we open our eyes in the morning. It's an opportunity to reflect on what's important. Choosing to focus on the news, the social media, whatever the heck else is in these computers in our hands, or focus on love and the values in our room and in our space. So I thought it would be a really fun opportunity this morning to look at different texts throughout the Torah, throughout the prophets, throughout the Midrash even, and look at different times when the text calls on us to open our eyes. So when we open our eyes, when we wake up, number one, what is the text calling us to do? And number two, what are we awakening within ourselves? So what is God asking us to see when we open our eyes? What are we looking for, both on that surface level and on a more deep level? And I think that those questions are enough for us to get started, and using the text, hopefully, as inspiration to think about how we want to awaken ourselves and awaken our souls for this month of Elul and for the days of awe to come. So can we go to the next slide, please? So Isaiah chapter 40. Does somebody want to read for us? Bobby?
Lift high your eyes and see. Who created these? The one who sends out their host by count, who calls them each by name, given such great might and vast power, not a single one fails to appear.
Beautiful. So we're going to stay on Isaiah for just a brief moment. So when we open our eyes, what are we called to do?
See.
Yeah,
See.
to actually see what's in front of us. Sylvia, were you going to add something to that?
Thank God for restoring our soul.
Yeah, thank God for restoring our soul. There's an element of opening our eyes and seeing what there is to be grateful for. Which, Barbara, you're smiling.
Yeah.
Because it sounds so obvious, but is that an easy thing for us to do? Like to see what there is to be grateful for?
Not in these days.
Not in these days. And so often we're walking and we're walking, or we're running and we're running. And how many of you have driven to work and said, how did I get here?
Yeah.
Like, did I stop at that stop sign? Did I run that red light? Because we go on autopilot. There's a muscle memory to our days so often. And when we're in the month of Elul, it's an opportunity to pause and undo some of that muscle memory. And what I think is so powerful about this verse in Isaiah is saying, you lift up your eyes, you open your eyes high, and you see. And we look towards the Holy One and have this element of gratitude for all that the Holy One has created. And how powerful is when we open our eyes and see things to be grateful for, instead of seeing all of the reasons to complain and bash. Thoughts, comments, Barbara?
I see me and I see life ahead, another day that I have to learn, love, give, get.
Beautiful.
And then I stop, that's when they'll put me over there.
Yes, so
Every morning I read sacred intention based on Jewish wisdom, and then when I finish reading, I say, thank you, God. There's a lot of things to do, and let's do it together.
so what I'm hearing from both of you is that we have a choice each day. When we open our eyes and when we look, we can look at the to-do list. I have to go to CVS, I have to go to Costco, I have to get my tires filled with air. Or I have a sacred to-do list where I have to give, I have to see, I have to choose. And what happens when you do that? It sounded like it inspires you to live.
Absolutely.
And you're thankful to be alive.
Yeah, there's gratitude in being alive. Susan, were you gonna say something?
No, I was just trying to hear it.
Yes. Let's go to the next slide unless anybody has anything else for Isaiah. I hope you'll start to see that there's some thematic similarities, but within these texts, there's also different ways of differentiating. So Psalm 121 says, a song for ascents. I turn my eyes up to the mountains and I ask, from where will my help come? My help comes from God, maker of heaven and earth. So when we turn our eyes, when we open our eyes.
I have a question.
Yes.
So what's the symbolism of the mountains? Why mountains?
Why the mountains? I imagine the psalmist in the desert, in the Holy Land. And when there's desert, I lived in Phoenix for 3 years, you see a whole lot of nothing. And then if you keep going through that whole lot of nothing, you can look up and you see mountains, you see potential, you see something that's a little bit different. If we're just looking down at our day, we're looking at the street, we're looking at the road, we're looking at the cotton, or we're looking at the animals. But then when we look up and we see the mountains, I see potential. I see where it's 100 degrees down where we are, but I see in the mountains where there's still snow on the mountain cap sometimes. I see back in the time of the psalmists, this idea that perhaps if you could just reach that top of the mountain, maybe you could get to the Holy One. Maybe you could get towards that answer, because we're stuck, we're on this flatlands. And here in Boca, it's different because I learned that like the hills along the highway, those are just garbage. It's literally the landfill. But where I grew up in Los Angeles or in places like Israel where it's desert, there are mountains to look towards. And so we're in the valley. I think about when we think about Psalm 23, even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil because God's with me. And this idea that perhaps God is up towards the mountains, perhaps there's potential, perhaps even there's something magical on the other side of the mountain. There's more than what we can see. Susan?
I think that we look at the mountains as Moses went up the mountain and encountered God.
Yeah.
And so I think that many people feel that looking up is where God is.
Yeah.
Even though we know God is all around us, when we want to engage with God, look up.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that in thinking about Moses, that's beautiful, especially for the days of awe. When we open our eyes and we ask God for help, that gives us that opportunity to try to find our own way of encountering God. Maybe it's a physical mountain. Maybe we really need to hike and reach the top of the mountain. Or maybe when we look up, we're looking at our beautiful art, or we're looking out in nature, we're watching the rain fall down. We're looking for our own opportunities to encounter God, because one of the things that's most miraculous about how we got from Moses and in the biblical time to here in 2024 is that somehow Judaism became a religion for all of us to have our own unique encounters with God. It's not that we have one leader and he is our liaison, but rather we have this opportunity to find our own encounter with God, and we can do that individually. And at least for me, I find comfort in doing it individually, but knowing that I'm wrapped in community. But some people really, if you don't have the strength or if you don't have the words, sometimes turning to a prayer book or turning to others in community. That's why services don't just exist. Like, you need 10 people to create services, to create a space for those sacred encounters. Maybe you're looking up in community, or maybe you're looking up and within yourself. There's so many opportunities to say to God, I'm asking for help, and I'm looking for that sacred encounter.
I was gonna say that from this one, what I regard is the ask is not in there. So maybe there's just comfort in even knowing that when you need the help, you know where to find it. Like, this is not asking for that help. It's just identifying the source of it. That's different to me. Like, just a comfort to be able to know that when I do need help, that it's available.
And this period of time in Elul, this is a time for deep introspection. I could probably start the list of all of the things, all of the times that I've missed the mark this year, but I need this month of introspection and reflection to start having those conversations with the people that I love the most, asking them, how have I hurt you? How can I do better? Because one of my favorite expressions is, you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes, as you said, it's good to just know where to turn, that God is there for that. But this period of time, it's good to know when you need it, but perhaps in these early steps, we're just awakening ourselves, we're just awakening our souls to start thinking about all the different things that we want to do, so that when we sit down on Erev Rosh Hashanah, we feel truly prepared to turn and ask for help, or to say to God, renew us, give us that strength to have another year. Yeah, Bobby.
I always ask people if I've offended you or hurt you. I have never had anybody, they all laugh, they all say, they never come up with an answer. Nobody has ever told me. I don't think they're I mean, because I'm not perfect. They're not introspective enough to think about how I have injured, hurt, or slighted them. And so people laugh when I ask them that. And I don't know how to get around that, because I'm almost afraid to ask anymore. You know, because I ask my family, and there are some people in my family, like my daughters, who will tell me, but there are people that you want to know, and they laugh. They think, oh, she's the religious one, and I'm thinking, I'm not religious, I'm just trying to be the better person. So what could you say in response to that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the beautiful parts of our teachings in this particular season is that there are 3 different relationships, right? So there's the relationship between us, being Adam l'chavero, between ourselves and other humans, being Adam l'makom, between us and the Holy One, and being Adam l'Atzmo, between us and our soul. And one of the teachings that I hold on to at this time of year is that you have to at least make that effort, being Adam l'chavero, between us and somebody else, before you go to the Holy One. But in so many spaces, it's not actually about them, it's about us. Trying to do that tshuva, trying to make those moments of reparation, it's about restoring our soul. Opening the door to say, tell me how I've done better, tell me all of the things that I can do. And even if they don't come up with an answer, or even if they don't say the thing that you're thinking about that one time that you said that one thing that may or may not have been the best or the nicest, gives you then an opportunity to go to the Holy One and release it. When we have Tashlich and we release all of those moments we weren't our best and brightest and our most perfect selves, we have attempted to make those reparations with somebody else, and maybe they long have forgotten about it after, like when you apologize and they laugh and they say, oh no, you're fine, like what was a big deal for us perhaps wasn't a big deal for them. But then that gives us an opportunity to really release it so that we can move forward and work on our relationship with our higher power and with ourselves. I think as long as we make that attempt with the people here, the relationship between us and our higher powers will help us to really be able to move forward in the year to come.
I think the other part of the difficulty is people are caught off guard. This is not part of our culture to do what Judaism is saying to us. And the second thing is they're embarrassed. Because, you know, we're a culture that's not honest, you know, it's all like subterfuge people. So this is part of the problem, you know. You could kid them, you could say, oh, come on, I know there must be something. You know, I mean, it's tough. The thing of a follow through that helps you is tough, but I mean, that's the only thing I can think of right now. Oh, come on. That's good. Help me. Or, you know, I did such and such to you this year and I feel really bad. Is there anything that you did, you know, to can make me aware of what I did? Another reversal, it's not.
I could tell someone else what they did if they asked me, but nobody ever asks.
They don't want to know.
The other thing you can do is if you really feel like you hurt, or really anybody, if you feel like you hurt somebody or you really want to have a productive conversation.
When I know I've hurt somebody, I bring it out and say, I'm sorry, but I'm asking for things I'm not aware of.
So if there's somebody in your life that you really love and maybe you haven't gotten that reciprocal, the conversation that you wanted, reach out to them and say, in this time of year, I'd really love to set a time for you, with you, to talk about perhaps how I've missed the mark and give them lead time. Like, I know that when I had like math class, I would sit in math class and be like, I totally get this. And then when I got to my homework, I would look at the math and think that it was gibberish. And then I have to relearn it. I need that time at home to really go home and process it. So maybe in that same vein, giving your loved one that time to process, say, I want to have this conversation with you. Can we set a date for sometime in the future so that they don't feel like it's just sprung on them, so that they have the time to think about what maybe hasn't sat well with them and do some of that introspective work, even if it's not on their radar to begin with. I don't know if that's helpful or more in line with what you're.
Sorry for that question.
No, it's a beautiful question.
Because I
Yeah, we ask each other.
we ask each other, but we never insult each other intentionally. But I have the same experience. People look at me, as you said, and
Right.
what are you talking about? And if it happened 10 months ago, they've probably forgotten all about it anyway. And I'm asking more in a general way. Obviously, if I've hurt somebody, I feel it's my responsibility not to wait until the fall.
Exactly.
But to confront it at that time. And I would wait till just that time, but I think Mark is right. It's not our society, and even Jewish people don't, they feel uncomfortable if you say something And,
Or sometimes they're pretty like a slice cut, you know, and it's so painful for that person that you did that to. That it's difficult when that happens to say to somebody, well, let me tell you. You know, Susie, you really hurt me. You know, I was really offended. I thought we were friends and you know, I mean, so it gets heavy.
Yeah.
And then the question is, then what do you do? If it's really heavy, let's say you clear the air. Right? So, but then there's the afterward, the stuff after, and are you so committed, you know, to Susie that I'm going to with her now that wound has been opened, you know, we talked about it. Do I really want to continue the friendship or the relationship?
It takes a
opens up
special-
lot of
Takes a special person to go on
very
after
special person to, you know, after that exchange.
the honesty.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you're talking about something that you knowingly did. And I think what Bobby was saying that was, you did, which is what I'm always thinking of when Rosh Hashanah comes along and saying that I didn't know that I hurt you in some way. And then then most people get over.
Because people are not accustomed to being aware of themselves and expressing things like that. I think you have to be like, you know, the people in a certain group to be able to do that kind of thing. You can't just do it with anybody.
Right, like,
You have to be able to do it within yourself and know yourself and believe in yourself, and it goes from there. It's
and that's
our choice.
That's part of why I love Richard Levy's approach to this by saying that this is a marathon. And number one, a marathon takes a lot of time. But number two is a lot of training and strength building goes into preparing for a marathon. And so this isn't meant to happen overnight. This isn't meant to be a one and done. This is meant to prepare our spiritual muscles to approach the year a little bit better than we approached the last year, to approach our interactions with each other, with ourselves, with God, with a little bit more holiness, with perhaps a little bit more humility than we have in the year behind us. Recognizing that we're fallible individuals and the people that we associate with are also fallible, but even through the discomfort, saying, I love you so much. And because I love you, I know that I'm not always my best self, because we all know that the people that we love the most are the people that sometimes we're the nastiest to. I don't get angry at, you know, just anybody. I get angry only at the people that I love. And because of that, it takes a different kind of conversation. And in this time of Elul, we're saying we're opening our eyes to and opening ourselves to. First of Elul is tomorrow, so okay, we're going to start apologizing to everybody. No, but we need to just prepare ourselves and start thinking about when do I think I missed the mark? Who do I want to make sure that I start this upcoming year on the strongest spiritual footing? Because perhaps there isn't anything that you can think of, or perhaps there's nothing that your loved one can think of, or your dear friends. But by just saying, I love you and I want to start this upcoming year off right with you, perhaps comes into this new year with a little bit more holiness. But I don't know. And, you know, it's one of those things that we're all so different and we all approach this differently, which is part of why we're trying so many different ways as a synagogue to inspire people to think about what this time of introspection can be. Not mandating that you do it in any one way, but just offering different ways to awaken our bodies, awaken our senses, to preparing. And then once we do that, then we'll move to step 2 next Monday. And remembering that it's a process, that we can't do everything all of the time. Aileen, can we go to the next slide, please? Aileen?
I've moved it to the next slide. Do you see it?
Yes, it just took
Thank
a
you.
moment. Okay, so this one I thought was interesting. We're just at a delay. And patience is a virtue. It's a good moment to say, hi, Mom, if you're on, I don't know, you said you might log on. But she would always say patience is a virtue, it just wasn't one of ours. Genesis, Adonai says to Avram, after Lot had parted from him, so Avram is now by himself. And this is before he fully attaches to the covenant and goes forth to the land that God will show him, before he becomes Abraham. Pray and lift up your eyes and see from the place that you are now to the north, to the Negev, down to the desert, to the east, towards the sea, or to the east and to the sea. Indeed, all of the land that you see, I give it to you and your descendants for all of the ages. So here, God is saying, open your eyes and see all of the potential. This is, I think, the first time that God actually lays out what the promised land is. Not the land that I will show you, but really in kind of like a Lion King moment, like everything the light touches can be yours and yours for your descendants. So when you open, Judith, you're looking concerned.
No, I'm listening.
Okay.
And listen.
I'm sorry, I'm not so loud today. So God's saying, when you open your eyes, I think you're seeing potential. Potential for yourself, but also potential for your descendants, for those that are gonna come after. Yes.
When I was a kid, my paternal grandfather always used to say, you have to make the best of it. You have to make the best of it. And we were little kids, and we didn't understand what he was saying or preaching or something. It was really tight. And eventually he passed, and my grandmother, it was like she was born again. I mean, she felt like she had a life again, and she became a new woman. I need to go see my sister in Palestine, and I want to go to Miami, and this. Well, a couple of years ago, I was putting my life in the hands of a man that I spoke to for an hour, and had my surgery on Friday the 13th. And just before I had this little awakening, and I thought about my grandfather, and I thought, you know what, Grandpa was wrong. You don't have to make the best of it, you have to make the most of it. And that was my epiphany. And here we are. And every day is a gift. And that's what moves me every day. Because I awaken, I get up, I as much as I can, I'm walking up to the beach to see the sunrise. And it's very early in the morning, and you just see the same people that you see walking their dogs or riding a bike or getting in their cars to go to work or what have you. But the closer you get and you see what the sky is doing, and you get up there and you see the water and you see the sky and the sea, and you awake to a new day again. And how thankful we and how lucky we are, and thank you for giving me that opportunity for another day.
Can I just say something?
What?
Can I just say something? It's really funny because the expression "do as I say, not as I do," and your paternal whatever it was, said, make the most of the best of it.
Make the most of it.
No, he said make the best of
Make
it.
the best of it, yes.
Or right, and he did. So
And he
it was, that wasn't who he was, it was just platitudes that he used to say.
Right.
He was a very well-learned man, and he was learned in all religions. Very, he grew up in South Africa. It was very, very interesting. But he wasn't right that way.
It was aspirational. Wishful thinking.
Aspirational.
And it's all easy until you have to set your foot to the pavement. The idea that I'm gonna train for a marathon. Hypothetically sounds great. It sounds easy. It sounds like I'm gonna do 2 miles a day, and then I'm gonna graduate and I'm gonna do 4 miles a day. And in 6 months, I'm gonna be able to run a marathon. When you plan, it all sounds doable and manageable. And then you run your first 2 miles. I can't run 2 miles. No, in a way that brings me joy. And so I think that there's something to that what we aspire to has to turn into reality. Just because it's aspirational, just because things seem good or could be good hypothetically, that's not where we live. We can't live in Disneyland. We live in the normal world. And so how can we take those couple of pieces that give us that jolt to move forward, but in a way that allows us to live in our reality and find joy and gratitude? Because we could say, oh man, I wish I lived in Disneyland because everything's happy and perfect and there's no trash in Disneyland. Or we could say, thank God I live in a real world where we get to take breaths and where we get to have real relationships and where there's joy in the imperfection, because that's the life.
I was gonna just say what, it just made me think of, like, the things you're talking about, like those rituals of praise or gratitude. Like, that's not Elul specific, that's like Judaism on the daily.
Right.
So I love the idea, because one thing that I sort of struggle with this period of time of reflection is like, so much focus on the falling short can make you lose your sense of like all that is right and well and thriving and healthy, you know, because, and so what I love is like built into our lives, like, is this daily sort of an obligation to remember those things. So that when you're working on the harder things, you're also seeing the sun, looking at the rain coming down as like feeding the plants, whatever it is, you know, you're saying thank you.
Cheshbon HaNefesh, this time of accounting for our soul, isn't just looking at the bad.
Right.
It's looking at everything. There's this book that we used to read to our campers called Have You Filled a Bucket Today? And have you filled a bucket today? It's a children's book, but it talks about how when you do nice things, you add to somebody's bucket. And then when you say something not so nice, or when you're mean to a kid, you take out from their bucket. And so the idea for the kids is to be a bucket filler, not a bucket dipper. And I think that what you're saying, Regina, is really important, that right now we have to be filling our soul with all the goodness so that it makes it more palatable for us. And it's not just deflating to think about all of the moments that we miss the mark. And the other piece that you said about this is Judaism 365 or 366 days of the year, not just for these 30. But what's so challenging is that so often these things that we prep, that we work towards in Elul and through Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and even into Sukkot, although I argue that, like, in the same way of New Year's resolutions, that you see that big influx of people going to the gym in January, by February, everybody back to their normal routine. we can start strong and we can say, you know, tomorrow is the first day of Elul and we're starting strong. And we're gonna stay strong, we're gonna keep going through Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But by the end of Sukkot, we're exhausted. We've had so many services, we've had so many times that we've said, I've sinned, I've gone astray, whatever. That by the end, so there's an element of this that is kind of like that New Year's resolution that we say, going to the gym is important to do all year round, not just in the month of January. Being grateful for being able to open our eyes and see the beauty of the day and all that we're called to do is important, and it's important today just as much as it's important in March. But perhaps this is a reminder of what we can see when we open our eyes, when we look beyond our to-do list of errands, but looking at what Liliana inspired me to call the sacred to-do list of each day.
It's the same when they used to have the mitzvah day. I said, why have one mitzvah day? So I asked Rabbi Dan, he said, well, some people, one is better than nothing.
Right. One is better than nothing, or perhaps it's a day of inspiration of realizing that you can turn this into a habit. And it's something that we teach with our bar mitzvah age students, because a lot of parents are like, isn't there a project, or isn't my kid supposed to have a bake sale? It's like, well, yeah, like that's great. Or what if we think about it as a project of and a way of teaching that the world is bigger than a 13-year-old's brain developmentally is trained to think. Bobby?
So how does that relate to Elul? That quote up there.
Yeah, so this quote, Adonai is saying to Avram, right in this moment when his name is about to change from Avram to Abraham, God is saying, pray and lift up your eyes and see from where you are now to the north. God's describing what we now know as the land of Israel. God's describing all of the potential that Avram can reach when he follows God, when he agrees to this covenant. When he agrees to the sacred covenant with God, Avram is promised that God will be with him every step of the way and will be with his children in this promised land. And so I chose this quote from Genesis as a reminder that when we open our eyes, when we look towards God, when we remember that we too are part of this covenant, and we read that in the month of Elul, and actually in Yom Kippur, we read Parshat Nitzavim, which is when we, as those that have come as descendants of Moses and Abraham, take on the role and the responsibility of the covenant, that we can see potential, that we are called on to choose life, that we're called to see blessing and curse, and to choose blessing, to see life, to choose life, and to choose all that we're capable of. We can turn towards God. And what I think is really beautiful between this, and I should have brought that quote from Deuteronomy, that we have each other to continue to follow and to pursue this covenant with the Holy One. That when we look up, we see potential for continued growth, but we also see potential in ourselves. Avram's call was to reach the promised land. We're lucky enough to live in 2014 where the promised land, the Holy Land of Israel, exists. So what is our responsibility in upholding the covenant? To follow God's commandments, to love the stranger, to love our neighbor as ourselves, to love God, and to be there, to have that sense of responsibility in upholding that relationship with the Holy One. Did that answer your question, Bobby?
I'm not so sure, as that quote brings us there.
Okay.
But what you said was very good.
Okay. So
I like what you said, I just don't see that quote doing it for me.
That's fine.
Choose life, yes. I set before you blessings and curses. Choose the blessings. I do see, yeah.
And we couldn't have gotten there without God saying to Avram, look towards this promised land. And we're not gonna get to all of them because in classic Torah study 4, I bring more than possible, but I brought 10 different pieces of text from Genesis all the way to contemporary Jewish song.
Oh, too bad we can't see them all. Can you maybe email them to us?
Yeah, I'll send them to
Or, you
a,
know, so we can reflect on it?
yeah, Aileen has them and we'll make sure that they get sent, but we'll go to the next one for now. Which actually, can we go to the one, yeah, let's go to that one, number 7 for now. No, I'm sorry, number 8, I can't read, I'm looking at this in miniature. Let's go to it, yeah. Okay, so this one, it comes from the Book of Kings, and again, Bobby, we'll send this out to you. This says, yet turn my eternal God to the prayer and the supplication of your servant, to all of us, and hear the cry and the prayer that your servant offers before you on this day. And this is the prayer. May your eyes be open day and night towards this house, toward the place of which you, God, have said, my name shall abide there. May you heed the prayers that your servant will offer toward this place. So this is a blessing for God, asking God to open God's eyes and see all that we're doing in service of the Holy One. And I brought this to sort of provide a contrast. What are we asking God for when we ask God to open God's eyes?
Are you asking us?
Yes, sorry. What are we asking? If we pray to God and ask God, may your eyes be open day and night toward this house, referring to the temple in Jerusalem, toward the place of which you have said, my name shall abide there. God is saying, I will abide in this temple. May you heed the prayers that your servant or all of us will offer toward this place. What are we asking God for when we're asking God to open God's eyes?
We're asking God to see us,
To hear us.
to see us as ourselves and help with this and help with that and whatever. But we're also asking God to see us for the good that we do and for who we are, and because we don't praise ourselves. So I think that's what this is.
And I think that this is kind of in contrast to Psalm 121, when we're looking up towards the mountains and knowing that we can perfect, that this is in contrast to that we can turn to God, but in the same way we're asking God to see us. And I think that is really important in this time of year, that we're asking God to see us in a way that perhaps God doesn't see us the other times of the year, or that we're asking God to renew being able to see us for everything, to see our efforts. That perhaps we're putting in different effort now, perhaps we're putting in more effort now. Perhaps, I don't know, but we're asking God to see us. In the same way that we open our eyes to see, we need that from the Holy One.
So here's a very convoluted question.
I love it.
So when did God decide that this was gonna be Elul? In terms of, you know, the world and creating everything, and the rabbis discussed and decided this is what's gonna happen.
Well, this is in Torah that we have on the first day of the 7th month, word for word, they name Rosh Hashanah, they name Yom Kippur on the 10th day of the 7th month, they name Sukkot. My favorite part, honestly, is in the book of Exodus, just before the actual Exodus, God goes through this whole articulation of how you're going to observe Passover. But Elul, I think, you're asking a different question, which is, when was it decided that we were going to prepare
Yes.
for this day, these days of repentance? I have to guess, and maybe Mark has a different answer, that this was an interpretation of the rabbis. Probably in the Mishnah, there's a whole lot of rabbinic conversation about what Yom Kippur is and all of the different ways that we prepare for that time of year. But I have to presume that this is a human response to being judged. For example, if you know that you're going to court, you're going to spend countless hours with your lawyer preparing for court. You're going to be super prepared. You are going to know what your argument is. In all likelihood, your lawyer is going to know what the opposing lawyer's argument is too, based on discovery and all of these other questions. And Barbara can probably talk about that more than I can.
I'm sorry, say it again. I apologize.
I said, if you're going to court, you're going to spend countless hours with your attorney, and your attorney is going to know their case and their argument, like through more than likely based on all of the evidence and discovery. They're going to know the opposing argument also, because we crave control. We crave preparedness as human beings. So if we know that on the 10th day of the month of Tishrei, the 7th month, that we're going in for holy judgment, that the holy book of life is getting sealed on the evening of the 10th day of the month of Tishrei, then I have to imagine that this whole period of Elul, of preparing for it, is a human response to try to have some sort of control, to have something so that we feel like we are prepared, that we have had, we've done everything that we can to make sure that our name is sealed in the book of life. But Mark, maybe you have.
No, I think you're right. Between the 1st and 2nd century, this began to be formulated, and but it was expressed in the Mishnah and developed later in the Talmud. But for sure, this is the 1st, 2nd century that we have the formulation of what Jews do during Elul, and certainly the traditions of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, like the rabbi said.
Yeah, but I can't forget that it's not just the good, it's what we need to make better.
Definitely. Right, you can't forget that.
That's good.
So how do we balance? How do we? And really, the month of Elul is, we're called on to create a cheshbon hanefesh, to really do an accounting of our soul. Like, think about during tax season when your accountant, or if you do your own tax in a week, you're finding every single receipt and you're trying to make it as balanced as possible. When we do an accounting of our soul, there's so many relationships that are important to you, or you could start and think about different interactions. What are the interactions that are still keeping you up at night? Or you can start with October of last year. What happened in October? What happened in November? What are the behaviors that I can improve on? Where perhaps do I see growth? How do I want to really create that, feel like you're on top of it? Perhaps you keep a journal of all of this so that by the time we get to Elul, you're prepared and you can just say, here's the notes that I need to go through. Like, you can say, here are all of the receipts that I need to go through. Or more likely, because I don't operate like that, I can't imagine everybody in this room operates like that, where you write down everything that you done where you think that perhaps you could do better. Maybe it's not about being a by yourself and saying, let me go through every last conversation, but rather let me go through my behaviors. Am I somebody who can be more patient? Let me think about some times when I've lacked patience. Let me think about some times when I've been more patient. And how can I do that reflection for myself to know that so that next year I could have more moments when perhaps I was more patient. There are countless ways to do Hushbon and Nefesh. There are countless ways to prepare for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. All that I think the month of Elul lasts, and all that we're asking in this month, in this week, is to open our eyes, look towards the Holy One, look towards ourselves, and find support, find all of those ways that we might be able to live a little bit more of an inspired life, so that as we continue going through Elul, in the strongest way possible. So with that, I promised we were gonna end at 12:55 because I need to run. I hope that this has done to what for learning during this month of Elul, and that you have begun to feel inspired to do your own preparation, either with us with our themes here at the synagogue or on your own, to keep joining the learning and the readings and join us for Sleep Code in 4 Saturdays from now. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know,